Gale, and welcome to this latest Harpers webinar, Folding Sustainability into the Boardroom DNA. I'm Andrew Catchpole, editor of Harpers, and I'm joined today by a great panel. We have Andrew Gale, who's Technical and Sustainability Director at Enotria&Co, George Kyle, Head of ESG at the C&C Group, representing Bibendum today, Jeremy Rockett, who's consultant and director at Rockett Science, his relatively newish company, and Kim Wilson, who's MD of North South Wines. I'll allow everyone to introduce themselves and say a little bit more about their company's sort of sustainability progress in just a short while. This webinar is, we'd encourage you to be interactive during the course of this, and it's specifically for a write-up for our sustainability report, or a recording will go onto our Harpers YouTube channel as well. Sustainability report we do twice a year, and they're linked to our sustainability charter, to give it a little plug, which is free to sign up, and it provides a platform for UK-based drinks companies to share their sustainable progress with both their supply chain partners and the wider trade, the broader trade, which is a great thing. We've also got, with Jeremy, in fact, with Rockett Science, we have on the 18th of April a clinic for SMEs, a sustainability clinic for SMEs coming up, which should be really interesting. So hopefully some of you will sign up for that. But anyway, today we're looking at some of the bigger players and boardrooms, and as I say, folding sustainability into that boardroom and all it does. So, okay, there'll be an opportunity for audience Q&A at the end, but please do post questions on the Q&A, and we'll look to make it interactive as we go along if your questions are sort of pertinent to exactly what we're discussing. So, enough from me, I think, and should we stick with the order I had? So if I could ask, morning panel, hello. If I could ask you to say a few words, introduce yourself, and give us some kind of indication as to sustainability and the role that's playing in your companies. So who would like to begin? Andrew, could we start with you?
Sure, absolutely. Hi guys, my name's Andrew Gale. I'm Technical and Sustainability Director at Enotria&Co. For those of you that don't know us, we're an importer and distributor in the UK. We have somewhere in the region of 600 suppliers and about 8,000 SKUs that we distribute. We published our sustainability charter last year, setting a very challenging net zero target of 2030. We also, for the first time, published our sustainability barometer, where we provided some transparency on how our supply base is performing across ESG, environmental, social, and governance pillars that we're measuring them against. We are this year working very closely with our supply base and set some sustainability goals for our exclusive suppliers back in December. We're going to be following up with them this year. Our theme for the year as a business is very much around knowledge sharing, and that's why opportunities like this I think are really great. But we're trying to learn as much as we can from our entire value chain, both customers and suppliers, to come up with common goals that we can all work towards.
That's great, thank you. And I think yeah, that knowledge sharing is very important, and hence sort of transparency and so on, and just to help encourage all to move forward, which is so necessary, isn't it? Kim, a few words.
Yes, so my name's Kim Wilson. I'm the founder and managing director of North South Wines. We're a similar setup to what Andrew said, but just a bit smaller. So we have about 30 plus suppliers that we work with, a turnover of around 30 million, and we import about 18 million bottles a year into the UK. So we're multi-channel distribution. The business was set up 9 years ago, and at the time when we set it up, we were really looking at doing something that was quite different, and that initially came from the supply base, that we wanted to work with wineries that had a focus on sustainability, organic more so then, because that's what we thought sustainability was organic back in that day, family run, and then with a purpose as well. So the business has obviously evolved a lot since then. And for us, about 3 years ago, I really kind of looked at what we were doing and everything that we were doing and asking for with our wineries, but actually we needed to look inwards at our own business and what we were actually doing with North South, because we weren't offering anything from an environmental sustainability or anything to do with the workforce that was really helping. And I think also when you're a new startup, sustainability can sometimes be the last thing you think about, in the sense of what you actually do for your own physical company, individual company. So about 3 years ago, we sat down and we had a look at what we could do. And for us, we decided, first of all, we went down the BRC agent and broker audit, which that has an environmental part of now, and corporate social responsibility as well. And then about 2 years ago, we looked to become a B Corp and started looking into what we do there. And B Corp for us was really about just looking at the right framework to do what's right for our business. And it's not just about sustainability. And I think that's a really big thing that we've learned along the way, is that you think sustainability and you just think green, but sustainability is everything. It's your workforce, your stakeholders, the environment, the planet, everything that goes with it. And I think it's such a big subject. So for us, something like B Corp was amazing because it gave us a really good, it's tough, it's really tough. It's not a tick box exercise. You have to make fundamental change in your business and change for good, but it's a really good framework to kind of get the business on the right trajectory for where we need to go. And so we hopefully will hear in the, I don't know, the next 6 months. I've got to be a bit coy, but we're quite far down the process. So yeah, fingers crossed. But lots of, we'll come on to it a bit later, I'm sure, and I can detail out some of the changes that we've made. But just to give you a brief overview of what we do.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's great, and that's very impressive. But as you say, sustainability is very broad if you look at it holistically, and there are so many different pathways, so many different elements that it can seem quite daunting, I think, to begin with, can't it?
Definitely, yeah, definitely.
Quite daunting some way down the path as well.
Yeah, and that's why what Andrew said earlier on, which is so good, is like knowledge sharing, because I think people don't. It's quite, as you say, really daunting when you start. And I remember when I first looked at B Corp, I was like, we'll never get that. We'll never have the time. We'll never have the resource. But I think sharing knowledge and working together on panels like this is really good for everybody.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, hopefully that's the idea. George, hello.
Andrew, good morning. And thank you for the opportunity to come and speak about C&C Group. We are the UK and Ireland's largest brand owner drinks distributor. Many people will not recognise C&C Group, and we're probably more famous for our brands, route to market brands like Bibendum, Matthew Clark, Tennent's in Scotland and Ireland, Bulmers in Ireland, and our consumer brands, Tennent's Lager, Magners Cider, and Bulmers in Ireland itself. I was nodding hearing Andrew and Kim speaking. We may be larger in scale, but we face exactly the same challenges, and we share exactly the same ambitions. If I look at the Tennent's business, we've been around for 500 years. I speak about Tennent's having sustainability as part of its DNA, and we talk about sustainability as a simpler word than ESG, because in this area it can be a land of acronyms that make the challenges that we all face even more difficult, because you have to explain the acronyms themselves. But the only way we can all succeed and deliver on the challenges that we face is through collaboration across our value chain, sharing knowledge. We actually formalised our sustainability approach probably going back 3 or so years. I'm in role, it'll be 3 years this year, although I've been with the business for a long number of years. And while we would have been doing some amazing things at a brand and route to market level, what we didn't have was a strategy. It wasn't aligned to our business vision. It was around the time of COVID, which probably encouraged a lot of us to think about our role in society and what we had to do. We are, I would say we're doing some great things, but we will steal with pride. We will reach out and ask questions. We recognise that we don't have the answers, and we recognise it's about progress, not perfection. So the opportunity to come and participate in a webinar like this with colleagues and share our experiences is a brilliant opportunity. So thank you again.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, it's important, isn't it? It's companies from medium to large size approaching this with some humility, but also sharing as part of that. But you do need those leaders that have a big impact on the market, a bigger impact than a small business. Is still incredibly important for the small business to make steps as well. But we'll discover a little bit more about that in a sec, I think. So, and so we're delighted today actually because we have our three charter champions, sustainability charter champions on board, so who have really invested and are helping us to sort of grow and drive that forward, which is fantastic. And then I describe you as an outsider, Jeremy, but someone who's coming from a very different, a slightly different perspective. So if you could perhaps give our audience a little bit of a background as to what you're up to in your involvement now.
Sure, yeah. So my name's Jeremy Rockett. I've spent my career doing what Andrew, Kim and George do, which is importing and distributing of wines and spirits. And to my shame, I guess, in the last few years, my business that I was building and running was asked countless times by customers like Andrew, customers like George, what's your position on sustainability? And we didn't even know where to start. And it took me leaving that business and then studying sustainability to understand that where to start and how to put a structure around it. And then to realize there are a lot of other businesses out there, small businesses in particular, that are being asked those questions. And most of them are pretty keen to understand what it means, but they don't know where to start. So what I've tried to do is build a kind of process that enables smaller businesses to take the learnings from people like the rest of the panel and start to work on sustainability themselves. And you know, the one thing that I've learned in the last year is what I don't know. It is a massive subject, and every day you learn something new. And I think that in some ways that's the attraction of it as well. Is you know, there's constant learning there. But it is when a small business looks at sustainability as a subject, it can look like a mountain to climb. And I think what George says is absolutely true. You're not going to achieve perfection on day one, but it is a journey, and the important thing is to start that journey and make steps in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. So in a sense, it actually is rocket science, but we can all get. So I had to insert a rocket science joke.
Well, I had to call the company that, but the point is it's not much in the world is rocket science.
Yeah, no, sure, exactly. Okay, thank you, Jeremy. That's great. Right, well, let's start with what might seem quite a naive question, but let's start at the beginning. Why is it important as a company to embrace sustainability? Should we just start there? Who'd like to pick that up first? Or shall I nudge someone?
I can go. Do you want me to go, Andrew?
Yes, Kim, let's go for it. So why is it important? Yeah.
I think for us it's important for every company, and I think if you just look at the nature of the wine trade as an individual, for us, we ship very heavy glass all around the world. Yes, there's UK packing and there's alternatives and everything, but the bulk of what we do is shipping very heavy glass. We still have a consumer that is very wed because we've led them down that route of thinking a heavier bottle with a pun means more premium wine, but might actually not be more premium wine. So it's super important as a business for us to do that that's from the kind of green side of it. I think the other side is also looking at what you do as a business and retaining staff, your key workers, your stakeholders that you work with as well. We all are in an industry that is massively suffering from shortage of staff. And the hardest thing for us is to recruit and retain good staff. And definitely from what we've been doing, the last 2 people that we recruited said they joined North South because of what our missions and our goals were, and really got a flavour for what we've been doing. So I think it's massively important across a big spectrum of things. And then from an environmental point of view, we can only see what's been going on in the world, and you know, the fact that we have a shortage of certain fruits and vegetables, or vegetables as such, salad vegetables levels at the moment is a big key on what's going on there. Yes, there can be government issues there going on as well, but you know, it's a big part of what is happening in the world today, and we're seeing extreme weather and changes within that. And, you know, France has been affected, Argentina's been hugely affected this year or last vintage, and I think it's going to continue that way. So we have to be responsible. We're selling a product that technically isn't responsible, but we need to make it as responsible as possible in what we're doing. And I think that's what's hugely important for us to do.
Yeah, and there's a slightly unnerving circle you can draw back, can't you, being based on rooted absolutely in agricultural products, seeing the effects of that perhaps us as an industry, along with all others, are contributing to, which then goes back and impacts very visibly through wine, through spirits, especially wine, on the product itself. I can see some nodding around there. Would anyone else like to sort of add to the importance of embracing? Yeah,
I'm happy to dive in. You know, there's the classic sort of trite response that it's the right thing to do, but for me, there's often a common misconception about sustainability, that people think it's just about climate change and the environment. But to Kim's point, you know, it's in practice, it means looking at social, environmental and economic issues, and there's a balance between all of those rather than, you know, just the environmental side of things. And the common myth about sustainability that it's, you know, it's sustainability versus profitability, but, you know, for a business to be sustainable, it has to favour environmental, social factors. Sorry, my dog's barking, I apologise. But in fact, you know, there's growing research that suggests that businesses with better ESG scores actually record stronger financial performance.
Yeah.
So there is as well as doing the right thing, there's a competitive advantage here for us. So it's the right thing for the environment, but it's the right thing for business as well.
Yeah. Can I just add to that? On the financial side, if you're going to cut your greenhouse gas emissions in your business, you are going to cut your energy usage. If you're going to cut your energy usage, it was escaped no one's attention that energy is really expensive at the moment. So, you know, if you start to cut your energy usage, you're going to start to cut costs. I know of a guy in Belgium who's a pate factory, supplies the UK. He put solar panels in some years ago. He has a competitive advantage because his cost base is lower than his competitors, because he's a very energy heavy business and he spends a lot less on his electricity. It's quite simple for him, and he can outbid anybody on a contract because his cost base is lower.
So part of that is where you're looking to invest to look ahead, basically. So there may be upfront costs, but it's the delivery down the line and to remain more economically competitive. And of course, we can't forget that pillar of sustainability, can we? If you're not economically sustainable, then all the rest of it isn't going to occur. It's not going to be there. So, sorry, George, I think you were looking to make a point.
Yeah, and again, the guys have touched on it. That getting good by doing good. In terms of investment decisions, if you can prove the sustainability case that delivers an economic value, you are more likely to secure investment in that area. Again, you know, a couple of the themes that were touched on from an environmental perspective. Similarly, you know, our switch to renewable energy came at a cost reduction at the time where, you know, we've seen, you know, unprecedented energy pricing. Our ability to put carbon capture into our production facilities meant that when CO2 was in short supply and prices went through the roof, you know, we had continuation of supply. The element in terms of culture and you know, we are on a journey to create one C&C to underpin and facilitate our brands. But one of the ways that we're able to do that as a business is we're able to point to the great sustainability initiatives that sit across the business that in the past probably would not have been shared with colleagues and would not have been promoted to potential employees as part of our recruitment strategy. So in terms of stakeholder engagement, again, the guys have touched on it. It's how does this apply to every stakeholder that we're looking to engage with?
Okay, that's great. And I think you've touched on there sort of how to embed this in the business, which gets down to the real core, the sort of nitty gritty of what I think we'd like to discuss here and share. Question I have is, can sustainability sort of in some way be bolted on? Is it something you can go and just purchase here and stick onto your company? Or should it necessarily be, and I suspect we're going to lean towards the second part of this suggestion, embedded more deeply in the business, its decision-making culture? I mean, how important is it to get down through the boardroom and right down to sort of grassroots level across the organization? Who might want to pick that up?
I'll go first on this one.
Yeah, great.
I think the greatest challenge we face in this is embedding sustainability in everything we do as an organization into all of our business processes. If we could just take it off the shelf and bolt it on, it would be great, but it's just, you know, this is a strategic initiative. It needs to be core to everything we do, and really requires us to engage and empower, educate and inspire both our colleagues, our suppliers and our customers throughout the value chain, if we're going to come up with this collaborative approach and align decision making and behaviours to deliver the sustainable future that we're all no doubt committed to. So bolting it on is just not going to work. It has to be at the heart of everything we do as a business.
Yeah, I'm assuming we probably don't have a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? No one's particularly going to sort of say nonsense. Kim, you're smiling.
Yeah.
Is it pretty much a one-word answer? Yes.
Yeah, it totally is. It's easier for me, slightly easier for me to say, because we're still a big company, but we're a smaller company, still relatively young. So it's easier to make those changes. I think it really helps when you've got people that sit on a board level that are hugely passionate. So as North South Wines, we're very fortunate to have somebody like De Bortoli that are leading the way with what they're doing from a sustainability point of view. The wine people and also Ray Kenderman, they've all got their own elements in what they're doing with that. Me, myself, I'm very passionate about it. And we also have a lady in the business called Rebecca Murphy that has kind of come up through the ranks as kind of junior role and basically giving herself the role of sustainability manager, because she's so brilliant at what she does. And what Andrew was saying about embracing, empowering, encouraging people. Rebecca, I think if you cut her blood would be green. And she really does do that. And that's great from a business point. But it also means that myself and Simon, our FD that sits on the board as well, that we can really instill that down through the business. And what's been really interesting on our journey is that we've actually had to make fundamental changes to our governance documents as part of what we're doing with B Corp. So it's totally in the DNA of what our business is, but also just getting that down in through the employees. And what's been great is that the employees have actually really embraced it and wanted to do it. So as an example, for example, we give 20 hours a year as charity work, and 80% of that has been taken up, and people are still looking at bits and how they can do extra, and people are actually doing extra in their own time now for local charity work and stuff. So, you know, it's only until you start asking the questions that you realize that employees actually, I think you sometimes forget what employees actually might want and not ask their opinions on certain things. And it's only when you start asking, you get all of this. And when we've been working on B Corp, we've had individuals say, can I help you on this project? Can I help you on this? Can I help you on that? So it's been really great. And for us, definitely, it's at the core of what we do and the DNA of what we do, for sure.
And so say at C&C Group and across your diverse portfolio, what's the experience there, George?
Again, very, very similar themes. You know, we have a board level ESG committee. Our CEO sits on that. 3 non-executive directors, so the governance structure and the rigor is in place. We have 5 ESG champions from the length and breadth of the business, whose role is to provide advocacy and educate colleagues and be a point of contact as to where can you find out what's going on. We recognise that we have to share our stories, and potentially we were not, at one stage we certainly were not good at sharing our sustainability stories across the group. You know, my appointment with ESG and my job title, and we have other ESG function sitting within, you know, a functional representation. It's built into our executive long-term incentive plans. increasingly we're looking to build it into our bonus structures. What we have to do is educate colleagues and make it real for them, and how does this apply to their day jobs. And just touching on Kim's point, again, that colleague involvement is absolutely critical. We have 4 employee representative groups looking at mental health, physical health, working parents, and a menopause working group. We've created an advisory group to look at DE&I. And the embedding comes from the fact that these are employee groups. They are advocating, they're agitating, they are demanding the standards and the approaches that the business has to make. So again, the recognition, we all default to it's environmental, but never losing sight of the social and governance elements that are fundamental in the embedding of a sustainable approach in any business.
Yeah. Okay. So that I think it's a really important point you're making there. So that the point's about embedding, and it so that it kind of almost reverses from a point of you know, you have sort of an ESG person or person saying, okay, this is what we need to do, and kind of chasing and shaking and encouraging and pleading to driven from internally and from the stakeholders, the you know, the employees in the company. So it's I
reference, Andrew, you know, our sustainability responsibility doesn't sit in an ESG function or somebody with ESG in their job title. It is incumbent in every one of us. It's how do we make that understandable for every one of us.
Yeah, no, sure. And Andrew, how's the experience at Enotria as you kind of go through this sort of evolution of you know, embracing aspects or all aspects of sustainability? How have you sort of embedded that more deeply in the culture?
Well, what we've done is taken it out of the boardroom a little bit, as far as this conversation is concerned. We've established a sustainability task force, which has a number of, if you will, ESG champions that sit upon it, and we meet every month. We set the board sets the tone. We agree the actions and the direction that the business should take to achieve those sustainability objectives, cascade down. So we've got a number of different work streams that sort of cascade out of that task force. And it's managed internally by those champions, but they're empowered to get any number of different employees onto those work streams to help deliver these different objectives. Now, some of them will be internal, some of them will go external to supply base, to our customers, but it's very much, you know, it's the workforce within Enotria&Co who are delivering this, not necessarily the board, or, as George said, somebody who's got ES&G in their title. So it's not me that's delivering it. It's the whole of the business that's focusing on these strategic objectives.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Well, we can always sneakily retitle the webinar a little later. But I mean, this is the point. The board and the decisions going forward have to be completely engaged, surely, and that's the point. So if that's being driven internally, but also by external forces and considerations, then it's. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to lie, Andrew. We all know that the last year and a half has been super tough for everybody. You know, we come out of the super tough time of COVID, and then we come into cost of living crisis and what's going on at the moment. And it is hard to keep it at the focus, but by having people in the business that live and breathe it almost just becomes every day. And, you know, yes, I'm questioned, like, should we be spending this money? Should we be focusing on this? Should we just be going out and getting sales? And it's like, well, yes, but we have to do everything. We have to try and do everything, because ultimately that will lead. And it's like what Jeremy was saying earlier on, is that, and what Andrew said, financially, you will be a better business by implementing these things. So the last thing you can do is go, right, okay, let's back off for 6 months. You just can't. You have to keep going. And I'll be totally honest, that has been a conversation in our business over the last year, but we've kept going, and you know, it is costly, but on the long term there will be reward from it, and that's what we see from it. And we're seeing some of that through energy and everything like that that's going, but it is difficult, definitely, I'd say. And you know, for any kind of smaller medium-sized business that's thinking about this, it is, you do sit like, okay, profit over this, time over this, and time is your biggest factor in all of this.
Sure.
And just having the right people and believing in yourself that you can do it, and not being afraid to ask for help. People like Jeremy, we had some amazing consultants that didn't cost us a lot of money to look at it, but they gave us the right framework and where we needed to go. And then, yeah, you do have to put the work in yourself. So yeah, it's a few extra hours, definitely.
Yeah. And I want to explore that kind of the investment needed in perhaps a little more depth. I'm not going to be asking anyone to give figures specifically, but to give some kind of idea. Perhaps so we can just move on to that in a little moment. But I think that's really key. Jeremy, I suppose we can make the link. I mean, I mentioned that we have in April, which you're hosting or co-hosting a workshop for SMEs, but presumably many of the same principles will apply, whether it's a larger, a medium size, or a smaller drinks business. There would be lessons that could, here you might not be able to put in a whole team or something dealing on the sustainability side, but presumably the principles are the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where someone like me comes in, is businesses that don't have somebody like George or Andrew that can do it as a sort of full-time job. But I think it's like any cultural change in a business. I'm sure we've all been in big corporates where they've tried to implement a cultural change from the top down and it doesn't really work, and then somebody on the board or the MD undermines it by doing something. Everybody has to believe in this. Businesses that approach me, some of them want to do this because they think it's the right thing to do, to quote Andrew, but find out the complexity of it afterwards. Other businesses, and it does worry me slightly, and the challenge with them is to get them on board in a more holistic way. Other businesses come along and say, we've had to answer a tender for this or that customer, and we need to put in something about our carbon footprint. And that's a great starting point, a lead in, but it's not just about working out their carbon footprint for a tender. And the challenge there is, and normally those conversations don't start with senior people in the business, they start with people who are filling in the tender document. The challenge there is to convince that business that it isn't just about filling in a tender document and coming up with some numbers. It is about fundamentally changing the culture of the business. And that has to be led from the top, but it has to go right down through the business. If I give you a tiny example, which sounds very mundane, but nobody should be having waste paper bins under their desks anymore. They should be having a recycling station, because you'll just chuck everything in the waste paper bin and then it will just get chucked in general rubbish and landfill. If the business puts in a recycling station, but the MD keeps his waste paper bin because he doesn't want to walk over there, then you're undermining it every single day. So everybody has to live the new culture if it's going to work in a business.
Yeah, I think it needs to become sort of second nature, doesn't it? You just don't think about it. And when we spoke a short while ago, Jeremy, I really took on board that waste paper bin point, checked in our office. And as you say, it might sound like a small point, but it then infuriated me to see how much paper was going into waste paper bins, rather than in a smallish office walking to a recycling station. It's just extraordinary. But and from those sort of small acorns, etc.
Exactly.
It's actually the mentality. Kim,
Andrew, I was just going to say something we've done just really quickly that's really worked well, is that we have a company WhatsApp group. So we have a North South Wines company WhatsApp group, which is all about the business, but we have a Sustainability Matters one. And literally yesterday, somebody posted on there about some paints that they'd bought to decorate their office that were all B Corp certified, and how they sent them out to them. They didn't send tester pots. They sent like card swatches of colour that you stick to your wall, rather than painting it with like 4 or 5 different paint pots. And it's things like shampoos and whatever else. So I think that's another thing, is it doesn't have to just be about what we're doing as an industry. It's about embedding that in people's homes. And that's something that I've really tasked Rebecca, our sustainability manager, with, is about that. Hopefully when we become a B Corp, how do we get people to buy more products that are B Corp or certified in any other way that you might not know? And there's a number of things. My skincare brand that I happen to use has just become a B Corp, and it's like, brilliant, I'll spend more and use more, brilliant. But it's kind of like really embracing that within your team and your company, that it doesn't mean that just because it's B Corp it's going to cost more, or it's going to be this or going to be that. Really looking into what other products we can work with, and how we get that into our staff as well.
Sorry, Andrew. No, Andrew, I love that aspect. It is not just about what colleagues can do when they're at work, it's how can we help them in their everyday lives, and what you're obviously doing with your team, you know, that it's exactly that kind of example that we're looking to follow and put in place. Again, it just makes it real. It's not one behaviour at work and a different behaviour in your life. This is about the practices that we adopt 24/7.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's very good points.
Sorry, Andrew. I was just going to say, I wonder who was going to be. I wonder who was going to be the first to use the C word. Congratulations, Jeremy. Culture. You know, this is probably the biggest challenge for all of us as a business. It's not about embedding the sustainability per se. This is a changing the culture of how we work, how our employees work, how our customers work, how our suppliers work, and it's the biggest win as well. So it's the hardest thing to achieve. I think the example that Kim gave, that shows you that culture is changing because people are taking it out of the workplace. They are starting to live it at home as well and think how they impact the environment in everything they do, not just in the office and in their work environment. So I think that's a great sign of a success.
Yeah, and WhatsApp costs nothing. So set up a WhatsApp group, it costs nothing. And if you want to participate, you participate. If you don't want to, but eventually those that might be a bit skeptical or not want to participate, that constant reminder, it grates on people, and it will soon become the norm as well. That's the thing. If not, Rebecca will definitely make sure it happens that way. So
I mean, that sort of peer pressure is great, because that gets more results than anything else.
Yeah, really.
Completely.
I think at the end of the day, that peer pressure can also be translated, and perhaps we'll come on to that in a little bit, into when you look along the supply chain, so your supply chain partners as well. I mean, in a sense, it's a similar thing. What I did want to ask though is about sort of tangible, achievable targets, and what tools, measurements, and goals. Could we give some examples? Obviously, Kim, you've spoken about B Corp. That's actually really tough. I mean, but it's as a framework, it's phenomenal, and it's from the Enotria and CNC group perspectives. Obviously, I've read a lot about what you're up to, and it is actually for the viewers out there. You can go onto our sustainability charter website and take a look. It's all there. But do you want to talk a little bit about the targets and goals and how important they are because we do as humans and companies need a framework as well, don't we, to achieve the big goals? Yeah. Who would
Andrew, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've got a whole raft of different objectives under our sustainability banner. Not least is the net zero commitment for 2030. But I think it's really, I said at the beginning, it's really easy to fall back onto climate change because that's measurable and it's definable, and you can go out and do your GHG emissions, get your scope 1 and 2 and become zero at that point. But then when it gets really hard, when you start looking at scope 3, and we're all under pressure to set science-based targets, but it's so much more than that. And George touched on the D&I side, the diversity and inclusivity, and the social impact to the business. And for us, that's just as important. So when you look at our 3 different pillars, they're all got an equal amount of resource applied to them. They've got an equal value to us as a business. So social impact, ethical as far as our supply base is concerned, making sure that we're doing risk assessments of our entire supply base. So we've, I come back to the culture side, but it's also, there's a transparency that we need to have throughout the value chain. And I think when you get that level of visibility and that level of collaboration, that's when you're really winning on this stuff. So that our objectives and our goals are, say, E, S, and G equally, but it's all on our website. If people want to look at it, please, by all means, go and look at the individual goals and measures that we're working towards. But we're not trying to be a one-trick pony and just hit environment on this. The other side of it, in terms of social and ethical, is just as important.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting you talk about going onto a website. When we launched our charter as the sort of pandemic began to recede, at least in the West, spend a lot of time reading through, you know, people's websites, the sustainability sections of websites, and more around the subject. And I must say, right the way through, whether it's big logistics companies, small independent merchants, everyone in between in the supply chain, it's really phenomenal, actually. Not just what people are doing, but the speed at which it's gathering pace. And I think that's all linked, isn't it, Andrew, to what you're saying? And it's along the supply chain, the expectation, whether you're a, you know, we've already touched on, I think, that, you know, you're one of the bits of the form you've got to fill in the contract or wherever is you know, well, you know, what are you doing about your not just carbon footprint, but the social side, etc. So, George, I don't know, do you want to?
Sorry, I was just going to say that there's certainly pressure from customers to achieve certain things, to win tenders, maintain business. But what we're seeing is that where we're setting 5 to 10 year horizon goals, if you will, the BHAGs, you know, the big, hairy, audacious goals, they're great, but it's really important to set incremental targets, because this is such a complex subject. It's really easy to get lost in that one big thing that you're committing to. But doing these objectives where you're getting small wins and incremental, maybe 1 year targets, it keeps the ball rolling. It keeps momentum to the subject and keeps people interested. So that, for me, that's where getting customers and suppliers involved, because they all bring something new and something different to the debate. And you suddenly pick up on something, go, why didn't we think of that? Great, let's all do that. And, you know, you just go down a slightly different route on one topic for a small period of time. So it's really important, we said at the beginning, you know, keep those communication channels open. And you know, whatever our commitments are, they're not all set in stone. We're here to be told we're not necessarily best in class. You know, there's something else that we could be doing. And just listening to some of the things Kim and George were saying, you know, I've made some notes here already, so I'm straight onto the WhatsApp group after this.
I'm going to charge you for that one later.
10%.
Last 12 months have been tough.
So I think that's maybe really important to get across, isn't it? That there are different and parallel pathways, and it's not if you can't make a leap to, and probably no one's ever going to be 100% sustainable anyway. So it's encouraging. Is this a good way to look at it? It's encouraging movement and progression down those pathways. It's very, very interesting. When I was down in South Africa late last year, and there quite a few producers and exporters I spoke to were saying, yes, okay, but we haven't been quite as responsible for environmental, you know, degradation for carbon emissions, such as perhaps some in the northern hemisphere and the Western world. What we're really focusing on as perhaps one of our primaries is the social side, because we have a slightly different set of conditions here, and that then is to be commended absolutely, as well as a sort of, you know, I'm not saying no one was interested in their carbon footprint there, but it was just kind of assessing priorities. Anyway, I think I'm probably going down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Jeremy, did you want to chip in about targets?
Yeah, I think, well, just to add on to what Andrew said, I totally agree that, you know, having a long-term goal, you know, I'm going to achieve net zero by this date or half my emissions by this date is fine, but you actually need to have a plan to get there. And, you know, some of those targets need to be achievable. They do need to obviously stretch us, but they need to be achievable as well. And what you don't want people to do is, you know, resort to buying offsets to cover their bad behavior. They need an actual plan that says, I'm going to reduce this by this much, and this is how I'm going to do it. And that's really important as well. I'm obviously there just talking about the sort of greenhouse gas element, but that's you know, whatever your target is, you need a clear plan to get there. It needs to be achievable. Needs to actually happen.
Yeah, Jeremy, just to add on to that, I really agree with that. I'm really anti just buying carbon credits to offset, because what's the point? It's, yes, it helps, but it's not, you have to make change, and you're just going to continue having to do that. So something we did was, we could have got an agency in to kind of do all our carbon footprint and everything for us, but our FD actually went off and trained. He wanted to be embedded in it and went off and actually trained to do it, and then has got people helping him with that. And I think that's really, really important to ensure that we do that. And I won't name names, but somebody somebody called me the other day to ask me about what we were doing around sustainability, which was brilliant. They're a much bigger company than what we are and much more established than we are. And they were actually asking me, what should we be doing and how should we be looking at it? You know, you guys seem to be doing a good job. And that, if you can do one or two things like that, it's just brilliant. And, you know, doing things like this as well, as we said. But yeah, I'm a big one, like you say, you can't just offset carbon. That's the thing, you have to make change.
Yeah, just
yeah, George.
Yeah, we've been going down the CDP route since 2012. My colleague Martin Dugan, who's head of group engineering, said he happened to not step back when everybody else did 12 or 13 years ago, and all of a sudden it became his responsibility. Thankfully, we've put some additional resource into putting that rigor round our carbon emission measurement. And again, to Andrew's point, while carbon emissions are critical, reporting and rigor and governance around all elements of ESG are obviously critical. But that measurement, and we did and have went down the science-based target route. We just had our targets validated in December. And the reason we went that route is recognising the point that everybody's is covered, that there was a final recognition that 95% of our environmental harm sits within our value chain, and science-based targets helps us prioritise who and where we have to collaborate with to tackle that. Stakeholders. We've got regulators. We're looking to report under the Task Force for Climate-related Financial Disclosures. We're being reminded of the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and what we're looking to do is put a roadmap in place that tackling of the Scope 3. One of our advisory groups is around ethical and sustainable procurement. We've put some baseline in place around our code of conduct, our modern slavery statements, ESG questionnaires to start to share information. But we also recognise that we have to educate and train our procurement colleagues as to how do they have meaningful conversations with their compatriots as to what is collaboration and what are the steps that you actually have to put in place to work together to tackle these harms collaboratively. Again, setting an objective of zero reputational challenges. And that point, again, I think that both Andrew and Kim mentioned the ethical considerations in terms of who you're working with, and do you have comfort that your suppliers are on the same journey as you are.
And I think this is perhaps incredibly important, isn't it, for many in our business, and especially in the position of importing and distributing on, in the sense, literally just been looking at someone else. You mentioned a roadmap, George. Another company that sells direct to consumer here, wines and spirits, and I think it was sort of between 6 and 7%. So falling into their sort of Scope 1, Scope 2 of their emissions come from their UK-based offices, businesses, staff requirements, transport there within that. When you get onto Scope 3, you're looking at, I can't do my maths this morning, but sort of 93, 94% is generated through the supply chain, getting from producer to, yeah, exactly. So, and I think that's probably a not unfamiliar kind of figure or balance. So what I think I'm trying to say or ask is that there's what you can do yourself immediately as a company, but then it's beyond that. It becomes really difficult because of the size of the, if we're just talking about, say, emissions beyond that, then it's even more important to work with. It's not as if perhaps you're a farmer here and you're selling through your cellar door and some local shops. You've just got a much more massive kind of backyard of considerations down the supply or up the supply chain. Yeah,
I think that's true, Andrew, and I think that's why people see it's a huge mountain to climb quite often.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that it is important for businesses to look at themselves. I think Kim mentioned earlier, looking inwardly at your own business. If you're if you're of a size that you're mandated to do one of the government schemes like SECR, they focus very much on scope 1 and scope 2. And I think, you know, whilst it's easy as a distribution company to focus on the product, you know, it is important to make sure that your own operation is up to scratch and you're doing the right thing. So we shouldn't lose sight of scope 1 and scope 2, because they're the things you have immediate control over as well. And perhaps for a small company approaching this, that's a good place to start, because you can get a handle on it before you then start looking at your scope 3, which is the mountain to climb. And you know, you can't influence everything in scope 3.
That's definitely how we've looked at it, Jeremy, because we can't, you know, we're a relatively smallish fish. We can't do everything, but just things like Rebecca, our sustainability manager, was out with one of our freight forwarders last week, just briefing them about what we're doing and also asking them more about what they're doing. And it uncovers quite a lot and makes them have to actually look. You can't just say, oh, well, they're great mates of ours, we've worked with them for years, so those subcontractors are great and we don't need to worry that we actually don't know anything about them. It's kind of like, yeah, do you know what? We need to look at everything that we're doing. And it's making other people think about what they're doing and what their impact is as well. And it's if all of us here can have that bit where we can help raise awareness, eventually something will drop. It's not our responsibility to make them make change. What we can do is try and influence them to do it, but it's ultimately it's their responsibility to make the change. But all you can do is influence them.
The point here is that everybody's scope 3 is somebody else's scope 1.
Yes.
So your freight forwarder's scope 1 is your scope 3. So at some point, as long as you keep asking the questions, like Andrew's asking all his customers, all his suppliers, the more people ask them the questions, the more they'll start to realize we need to get onto this.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's important. Again, it comes over that thing of we've looked at, you know, suppliers that we might have worked with in the past, and we were working with them because it fit a price point and it made us money and whatever else. But actually, when we went down to this part of stuff that we're having to do now, it's actually like, no, do you know what? It doesn't fit with what we're doing. So we have made changes with suppliers and stakeholders and third parties that we work with. We've made changes and said, nope, sorry, we can't work with you. It doesn't fit with what we're doing. So again, it's about not being frightened to say no, or if you've got a great relationship with somebody, is bring them on the journey, pull them along with you and bring them on the journey with you so that you can continue working with them as well, but they become better because of that as well.
Yeah, great, fantastic points. And I'm just not backtracking, I didn't mean to make it sound as if don't be concerned about, but we've come back to that point about there are some low hanging fruit which you can deal with, and we need to move quite fast on these matters, don't we? So looking at the global context, obviously. So what I did want to ask though is what sort of investment or share of profit is, and we have touched on the economics of this, needed to drive sustainability or investment in sustainable progress. I mean, realistically, how much of a economic investment is needed, and perhaps on an ongoing basis? Surely there are costs. Have we reached a tipping point where you can't afford not to do this? Who would pick that up, George? Yeah,
I'll jump in. Andrew, you won't be surprised we wouldn't quote figures, but what we have is a ring-fenced investment. They touched on it earlier on. If you can look at any investment decision through a sustainability prism and it pays off, it gives that increased confidence that that's exactly where we should be investing. We have examples, at branded level, where campaigns where we promoted the sustainability credentials of a couple of our own brands and then did the evaluation. It returns some of the most powerful brand scores that we've seen. I talk in cliches. Sustainability is the new rock and roll in terms of what appeals certainly to most consumers. Again, I think Kim touched upon it. In the current environment where people face this hideous cost of living crisis, it perhaps is slightly recessed, but over the longer term, every brand and every business has to have a credible story to tell in this area. Otherwise, they're jeopardising their own future, never mind the planet's future from an environmental perspective.
Yeah. anything we can?
I can talk a bit if you want. I'm not going to quote numbers, but I can quote percentages. So obviously, as I said, we know this year has been a challenge. So my margin might not be where I expected it to be come to the end of the financial year through whatever costs we've had from excess freight and whatever else there has been going on this year. But we had about 3% against EBITDA for what was roughly what we were going to be paying, and we've spent that, but we definitely haven't made the money that we thought we were going to make this year, like many others. So it would be a lot more, but I would say somewhere around a 3% is, you know, it's not massive in the scheme of things. And when you actually, that's looking at physical costs as far as what you actually do. Obviously, you've got to look at staff and investment of what you do with that, but it's hard to put that in because we have one person that kind of heads it all up for us, but the whole company of 28 people are involved in it. So that's hard to attribute that cost to it. But I definitely say that it's not as expensive as what you think it would be. And as Jeremy said, that you can make the small changes to begin with. One thing that we did recently is Rebecca went on a course with the University of Cambridge for the Institute for Sustainability and Leadership Management, and it was brilliant. And she came back to me and she said, Kim, do you know what, I'm so proud to work for somebody like North South because you're at the forefront, you're at the beginning. There's so many companies that aren't even thinking about this, but you've got to make that change. And it's almost slightly easier for the people that have started, like the people on this group that have started making that change, because you're ahead of the curve, because everybody's got to make that change. So I would say from a profitability point of view, it's not huge in the scheme of things. And, you know, depending on whether you're a big, small, medium company, you can make those changes some changes fairly quickly with minimal impact to your bottom line as well. And overall, long term, as George was saying, is that it will improve your bottom line as well. Costs will get better. Obviously, it's really tricky at the moment. None of us knew what was going to happen to electricity and gas and everything, but it will get better. And you have to, and sustainability isn't a short-term thing, it's a long-term thing. So we're thinking 10, 15 years away of, you know, where we're going to get to and the impact that we make for that.
Yeah, sure. No, okay, thanks. That's all very clear. I was just about to shout out actually to our audience. I'm aware that our hour is fast driving to a close, but maybe we could just go over just a little. Richard Graham, hi Richard, has asked how does the panel think web 3.0 technologies, 3.0 technologies such as blockchain might be used to increase consumer engagement with the sustainability agenda? Which I don't know if anyone wants to just sort of quickly pick that up.
I'll say something about consumer engagement because I've had conversations recently with a number of retail brands. One of the challenges is how you communicate messages about sustainability in a way that is genuine and credible and also understandable by consumers. And I think, you know, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of companies now looking at validation of products, and that's probably where blockchain comes in, to say at every step this has been looked at and it is a net zero product or a sustainable product or whatever. So I think there's definitely a bit of work to be done around how you communicate sustainability to consumers at the product level. I was listening to Andrew's panel a couple of weeks ago, Sustainable Wine Round Table, and somebody mentioned about dolphin-friendly tuna. And it's really easy, isn't it, to say dolphin-friendly tuna and consumers get it. You know, no dolphins died in catching this tuna. But it's very difficult on wine brands, for example. Kim mentioned heavy bottles. How do you communicate the benefits of a light bottle very quickly at point of purchase to a consumer in a way that's motivating but also that it's genuine? It's really hard to do that, and I think we've got some challenges ahead on learning how to communicate better.
It's interesting on that same panel. We touched on the legislative change that's happening in Europe, where from December the 8th, European wine producers are going to have to communicate nutrition and ingredient information. Now they can do that on label, but there's an option to use a QR code to take you from the bottle at the shelf edge to a platform where you can provide all that information. Now, those platforms also enable you to put sustainability information and information about the producer on there as well. You can't put marketing information, but you can have a scan and you're instantly, more about the product than it's ever going to be possible to put on the back label.
Yeah.
So,
augmented reality could come in there as well.
Yeah.
there's a whole nother, well, I mean, a whole other series of webinars there, aren't there? The communication of sustainability, and we know that it's.
But I think whatever
Yeah.
the technology that provides
Yeah.
the method to communicate, the message still needs to be thought through about what is sustainable in wine or spirits, and what can we say quite quickly to a consumer that is true, but also understandable.
Yeah, it has to be relevant to the consumer. They have to understand it.
Yeah,
You know, it's all very well, you know, quoting scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, SBTIs, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Customers will switch off so quickly, but you give them a picture of a nice, pretty vineyard, and they get it straight away.
Exactly.
We want to keep.
Colleague.
Yeah. That's. I think that's been one of the challenges. But I'll move it back to our core focus, and also just aware of time, as I said. But so a concept like organic, I think, is really, really simple to explain to consumers. A concept like sustainability, because of its breadth, its holistic nature, the number of sort of, is much more difficult. It's very difficult to actually define, in a sense. We did try to get panelists to define it a short while ago. We came up with some good definitions, but so I've just to sort of draw to a close, I just wanted to give everyone and anyone, but no one on the spot, an opportunity, if you just wanted to sum up in a few comments, sort of, takeaways from today, or what we might want to give to our audience in terms of resources, actions required to sort of fully embed sustainability in the company's DNA. Is there? We've covered a lot of ground. I think we've covered a lot of interesting points to be made. But is there sort of one takeaway that any of us can distill it down to? Or several one takeaways? Or is that putting everyone on the spot a bit too much? I
think it's difficult to get to one.
Yeah, well, we'll go for just a final thought, I suppose. Yeah.
I mean, for me, one of the most important things is to have the vision to look beyond just compliance and regulation, and to work, as we said, collaboratively to identify those genuine opportunities for change. And sitting alongside that, Kim's made some really good points about recruitment and empowerment and education. So that knowledge and skills and sharing best practice really has to sit alongside the appetite to go out there and not just pick the low-hanging fruit, but to really work towards the difficult goals that we know exist.
Yeah. Okay. No, I think that's a very good summary. Would anyone like to add, or are we good?
Yeah. I will. Mine is more just don't be frightened to ask. There's people on this panel that will be more than happy to talk to anybody about it. But I think, when we started out, it was a minefield. I had no idea. I actually have a best friend that kind of works in this area. She helped me out with quite a few bits. But you don't know what to do. And the best thing is communication. And the more you talk to people, the better you get for it, and the knowledge that you get. And, it is going to be some hard work, and you've got to put in some extra graft and some extra hours, but it will pay dividends. And we're seeing this definitely. For me, I'm just going to give a punt to us. We have a 4.74 score out of 5 for our employee survey, and that's just amazing. And that people enjoy working, they see the benefit and see what we do, and that's all part of because what we've done, and just a small part of what we've done. And I think if you can do that, employee is probably one of your biggest costs in a lot of business, and having good staff. And if you can benefit from that, and then you benefit the planet and the environment, it's all win-win, to be honest with you. So mine would be, as Andrew said, communication is the key thing, and don't be frightened to ask. And it isn't as bad as what you might think it might be initially, just to make those small changes.
No, fantastic, cool.
Yeah, I'd echo that and just say it's a journey. Take the first step.
Yeah. Just start, basically. Mm-hmm.
And just on that point that Kim raised, Andrew, and again, we've all touched on it, we all default to the environmental piece, but the engagement of staff and communities and consumers, and what we can do for colleagues, and we've touched on many of the themes, we never lose sight of the power and the commercial benefit of that focus, especially given, again, the context of staffing and the struggles that we're all facing in staffing just now. So if it's a positive differentiator to help you recruit, or it's a positive differentiator to allow you to retain and develop staff, there are some relatively quick wins against the context of, I don't even know where to begin in the environmental journey. The colleague focus can make a huge impact.
Yeah, fantastic, thank you. Now that sounds like just a perfect place to conclude, but there's just one question from Fran Draper, hi Fran, out there, which I think would provide potentially some really good feedback takeaway for our audience. So it's in a sense a simple one. What training courses would the panel recommend to help businesses integrate sustainability? And I thought that literally just popped into the Q&A a second ago. Anyone out there, any out there that would immediately spring to mind, or is it perhaps something that we could collate later and share with our viewers?
The one I would share, because we're relatively early into the process, the supplier screening with CDP, Andrew.
Yeah.
Again, that scope 3 focus, how do we equip colleagues to be able to go out and have the conversations with their compatriots? CDP have been excellent in terms of the amount of resources that they provide, the webinars and the education and guidance that they give colleagues. It is only year 2, but we've had positive feedback from colleagues who've been through that process, just in helping them understand what, as I say, the detailed conversations that they have to drive that collaboration across the value chain.
Yeah, there's a number we've done as well. I'm happy to share them afterwards, from mental health to carbon emissions, all sorts of stuff. There's a number of things that we've done to electric car schemes, all sorts of stuff that help you and give, you know, preferential rates to employees and things like that. So I'm really happy to share at the end of this.
Well, I think also perhaps then maybe I should step in and say we can make a pledge through our sustainability charter that Harpers we will host. We will pull together these resources in one place, which I think would be a fantastic thing to do. And I've said that on air, so I'm going to have
You've made a commitment.
I've made the commitment.
There was no date though, Andrew. We need to tie you down for a date. It needs to be measurable.
Oh, it needs to be measurable. Yes. Okay.
I was just going to say, Andrew, there's some really useful free training from the United Nations on sustainability stuff that you can access online. So I'll make sure that you get the link for that. It hits at a lot of different levels. There's some real sort of entry-level stuff that anybody could go on and just learn about, to, you know, commitments over a couple of weeks to get the training. But you know, there is stuff out there that's free and really valuable.
Yep. Okay. No, fantastic. That's great. So superb. Good. Okay. Was there something else I was going to mention? And yes, I suppose a little plug again for 18th of April. You'll be able to find details on Harpers, and we'll be mailing our readership, making some noise about it. Probably plug it in our own newsfeed for our sustainability workshop with Jeremy for SMEs. So for smaller businesses, I think that's another resource which hopefully will be very helpful for those who may not be able to sort of have dedicated people within their business who are helping to sort of drive sustainability forward as part of the fabric of those businesses. Right, I'm going to stop on that point, so I'm falling over my words, but I think it's been absolutely fascinating. Hopefully it's been really you know, interesting and perhaps instructive for some of those listening in. Thank you all. And a huge thank you for our articulate and insightful panel. So Jeremy, Andrew, George and Kim, thank you very much. It's been good chatting to you.
Thank you.
Thank pleasure. Thank you.
Nice to meet you all as well. See you later.
Guys. Thank you.
Speak soon. Cheers, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.